The first time Madison Vale touched me without arguing, her father's dealership was already mine. Not legally yet. The paperwork was still sitting unsigned inside a glass office behind us. But everyone in that showroom knew it was over. The salesman who used to laugh when 12 dead cars got dumped across my driveway wouldn't even look me in the eye anymore. Somebody had turned the music off. You could hear the buzzing fluorescent lights over the service bay. Madison stood beside the coffee machine in a gray wool coat, arms folded tight like she was holding herself together by force. "You really gonna keep the name?" she asked quietly. "Vale Motors." I looked through the showroom windows at the snow collecting along Colfax Avenue. People around here still need a place to fix their cars. She gave a short nod like that answer hurt more than if I'd tried humiliating her back. Then she stepped closer and brushed grease off my wrist with her thumb. Small thing. Barely anything. But after the last 3 months we'd survived together, it felt dangerously intimate. And honestly, it scared me more than buying the dealership ever did. If you're listening from somewhere cold tonight, tell me where you are and what time it is there. I always wonder who's awake during stories like this. And if you end up liking where this goes, stick around. I've got a feeling this one's going to hurt a little before it gets better. 3 months earlier, my driveway looked like a salvage yard. I was standing at the stove making boxed mac and cheese for my daughter when I heard the first air brakes outside. Then another. Then another. Heavy diesel engines rattled the windows hard enough to make Lily look up from the living room floor where she was coloring. "What's that?" she asked. I remember wiping my hands on a dish towel and walking to the front window, already irritated because nobody parked trucks on our street that late unless something had gone wrong. At first I thought maybe construction. Then I saw the tow trucks. 3 flatbeds lined up bumper to bumper under the streetlights. My stomach dropped before I even understood why. What the hell? The first car rolled down the ramp, crooked, one headlight busted out, snow crusted along the hood. Then another came down behind it. Then another. By the time I stepped onto the porch in my boots and old flannel jacket, there were already 5 dead vehicles spread across the curb in front of my rental house. The neighbors had started coming outside. Phones already out. Recording. I walked down the icy steps toward the lead tow driver. "You got the wrong address." The guy didn't even look at me, just pointed across the street. That's her call. That's when I saw her leaning against a black Range Rover with her arms folded. Madison Vale. Even from half a block away, she looked expensive. Long camel coat, dark jeans, perfect hair despite the wind. The kind of woman who looked like she belonged in rooftop bars downtown, not standing in front of a working-class duplex in Lakewood watching junk cars get unloaded like entertainment. I knew who she was before she crossed the street. Everybody in Colorado who worked around dealerships knew the Vale family. Vale Motors had 3 locations around Denver and a reputation for treating mechanics like disposable equipment. Madison stopped a few feet in front of me. "You Ethan Brooks." I nodded once. Her eyes moved past me toward the house. "You really fix cars out of your driveway." There it was. That tone, not outright cruel, worse, amused. Behind her, another car clanked down onto the pavement. "Number 6. You mind telling me why there are half a dozen dead vehicles in front of my house?" I asked. 12, she corrected. I stared at her. She smiled a little. "Actually 12. One of the tow truck drivers laughed under his breath. I could feel heat climbing the back of my neck now. Not because of the cars, because Lily had opened the front door behind me. "Dad." I turned immediately. "Inside, kiddo." "But now." She disappeared without arguing, but I caught the confused look on her face before the door shut. That made it worse. Madison noticed too. Something flickered across her expression for maybe half a second, but it vanished fast. She handed me a clipboard. "My service manager said you talk pretty big online about being able to fix anything." "I don't even know your service manager." "Mister." She tilted her head toward the cars. "Most of those are trade-ins we were going to scrap or dump at auction anyway. Consider this a little challenge." The neighbors were fully watching now. One guy across the street was literally sitting in a folding chair with a beer. I looked back at Madison. "You dumped 12 broken cars in front of a single dad's house for a joke." Her jaw tightened slightly at the word single dad, like she hadn't expected me to say it out loud. "It's marketing," she said. "People love comeback stories." I actually laughed once at that. Short, sharp, tired. "You think this is funny? I think if you're as good as people claim, you'll make money off it." Another car rolled down behind us with a grinding metallic crunch. Number 7. My driveway was almost blocked completely now. There were leaking fluids on the asphalt. The HOA across the block was going to lose their minds by morning. I stepped closer to her then. Not threatening. Just close enough that she finally stopped looking entertained. You got about 10 minutes to get these things off my street. The wind pushed loose snow between us. Madison held my stare longer than I expected. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't fully comfortable either. Not scared. Just uncertain. Like maybe this had sounded smarter in a conference room somewhere. You know, she said quietly, most guys would be grateful for free inventory. Most guys don't have an 8-year-old trying to sleep 20 feet from a tow yard. That landed. I saw it. Tiny reaction. Barely there. One of the drivers walked over holding paperwork. Where do you want the last 5? Madison didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on mine. Then she looked away first. Just line them along the curb. I stood there in silence while the trucks kept unloading. Neighbors whispering. Engines hissing. Metal chains rattling against ramps. By the end of it, my entire property looked wrecked. 12 broken vehicles sitting under yellow streetlights like abandoned mistakes. Madison tucked her hands deeper into her coat pockets. You've got 72 hours before the city complains, she said. Then she hesitated. Actually hesitated. Good luck, Ethan. And somehow that sounded less insulting than it should have. I watched her walk back toward the Range Rover while snow collected on the shoulders of my jacket. Before she got in, she glanced back once. Not smug anymore. Just looking. Then, the SUV disappeared down the street with the tow trucks behind it, leaving me alone with 12 dead cars freezing air and a daughter inside the house waiting for me to explain what the hell had just happened. I barely slept that night. Not because of the cold. Because every time headlights passed outside, they flashed across 12 dead cars sitting in front of my house like a public humiliation project. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up trying. I pulled on my boots, grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and stepped outside with my hood up against the wind. The neighborhood was quiet again. No phones. No neighbors watching. Just me and the sound of snow crunching under my boots. The first car closest to the curb was a silver Ford Escape with dealership marker writing still across the windshield. No start. I popped the hood. Battery terminals corroded to hell. Loose ground connection? That alone didn't mean the engine was dead. I moved to the second vehicle. Then the third. By the time I got to the 5th car, I was already irritated for a completely different reason. Half these vehicles weren't scrap. Neglected, yeah. Poorly diagnosed, absolutely, but not dead. Which meant one of 2 things. Either Vale Motors had incompetent techs, or they were labeling repairable trade-ins as junk because fixing them cost time they didn't care about spending. Neither possibility made me like Madison anymore. Behind me, the porch light clicked on. You're working already. I turned. Madison stood near the sidewalk holding 2 coffees in a cardboard tray. It was 6:30 in the morning. Gray sky, thin snow still falling. And somehow she looked even more out of place in my neighborhood than she had the night before. I straightened slowly. You stalking me now? I was nearby. At 6:30. She ignored that. I figured you'd either be trying to sue us or trying to fix them. I wiped my hands on my jeans, and apparently I guessed right. I should have told her to leave. Instead, I looked at the coffee. She noticed. One's black, she said. Tow driver said you don't put anything in it. That guy talks too much, mister. She handed it over anyway. Our fingers brushed for maybe half a second in the cold. Nothing dramatic. Still felt weirdly noticeable. I took a sip while she walked toward the Ford Escape. You already find something. Loose ground wire. That's it. That's enough to stop it from starting. Madison frowned slightly. Our service report said engine failure. Then your service report's garbage. I expected her to get defensive. Instead, she crossed her arms tighter and looked at the car like it had personally embarrassed her. That tech's been there 11 years, she muttered. Then he's been wrong professionally for 11 years. That got the smallest reaction out of her. Not a smile exactly. More like she almost forgot she was annoyed. For a minute, neither of us talked. The morning air smelled like wet pavement and antifreeze. A train horn echoed somewhere downtown. Madison looked toward my house. Your daughter awake? Not yet. How old is she? 8? She nodded slowly. Then quieter. She looked upset last night. I shut the hood harder than necessary. You think? Madison flinched a little at that. Not visibly dramatic. Just enough. I didn't know. With that I had a kid. No, she said, that there were going to be cameras everywhere. I looked at her carefully then. You seriously thought dumping 12 junk cars outside somebody's house wasn't going to end up online? Her jaw tightened. It wasn't supposed to turn into whatever that became. Yeah, well, welcome to the internet. A city utility truck rolled slowly down the street then. The driver glanced at the vehicles and kept going. Great. Exactly what I needed. Madison noticed my expression. You really think they'll cite you? I know they will. The city of Lakewood loved code violations, especially in neighborhoods trying too hard to become up and coming. One complaint from the wrong retired neighbor and suddenly you're paying fines you can't afford. Madison shoved her hands into her coat pockets. I could probably make a call. I laughed once. There it is. What? The rich person solution. Her face cooled immediately. I was trying to help. No, you were trying to clean up a mess you caused without actually admitting it was a mess. Silence. Sharp this time. She looked away first. A few seconds later, my front door opened. Lily stepped outside, bundled in a puffy purple jacket backpack, hanging crooked off one shoulder. She stopped when she saw Madison. Oh. Madison straightened awkwardly. Kids made some adults nervous. You could always tell. Lily looked at the cars, then at Madison again. Are you the lady from last night? Madison cleared her throat. Yeah. Lily studied her for a second with that painfully direct honesty kids have before they learn how adults hide things. You made my dad sad. Jesus. I closed my eyes briefly. Lily. No, it's okay, Madison said quickly. But her voice sounded thinner now. Lily hugged her backpack straps tighter. Dad didn't eat dinner after you left? That one hit harder. I saw it happen in real time across Madison's face. Not guilt exactly. Something quieter, more uncomfortable. Like she suddenly realized this whole thing kept existing after the cameras stopped recording. A school bus turned onto the next block. I crouched beside Lily. Come on, Bug, bus is here. She nodded. Before running off, she glanced back at Madison one more time. You should say sorry. Then she jogged toward the corner. Madison stood frozen beside the Ford. The bus doors hissed open. Kids shouting. Cold wind pushing snow along the curb. Finally, she spoke without looking at me. I didn't know she'd see it. I stared at her for a second. Then I said the truth. That's kind of the problem, Madison. She looked up fast when I used her first name for the first time. Not angry. Caught off guard. And for one strange second, standing there beside 12 broken cars, neither of us seemed entirely sure what this thing between us was becoming. Then her phone started ringing. The moment disappeared immediately. She checked the screen and muttered something under her breath. Work. Unfortunately. She took a step backward toward the street. Before leaving, her eyes moved over the cars again. How many do you think are actually fixable? I looked down the line of vehicles. Most of them. Madison stared at me carefully after that, like she was trying to recalculate something. Then she gave one slow nod. I'll be back later. I frowned. Why? A tiny pause. I don't know yet. And somehow that answer stayed with me long after she drove away. By the third night, my driveway had become neighborhood entertainment. People slowed down while driving past. A teenager across the street had started calling my place the graveyard whenever he walked by with his friends. Somebody even left a handwritten note under one of the windshield wipers. Good luck, Lowell. I threw that one away before Lily could see it. Colorado weather turned ugly fast that week. By Thursday evening, snow was falling thick enough to blur the streetlights into soft yellow smears outside the garage lamp I'd rigged over the driveway. My fingers hurt from the cold, the kind that settles deep into your knuckles after hours working metal. Still, I kept going, because every car I got running was one less thing hanging over my head. The silver Ford had started that morning after $30 in parts and 2 hours of swearing. The Chevy Tahoe needed fuel injector work. The Subaru's transmission wasn't blown like the dealership report claimed, just a sensor issue. Either Vale Motors had stopped caring, or somebody there had gotten lazy enough to call anything complicated dead. Around 11 that night, I heard tires crunch slowly outside. I didn't even look up at first. Shops closed, I muttered. A car door shut. Then footsteps approached through the snow. You charge everybody this much attitude. Madison. Of course. I leaned back from under the Tahoe and slid out on the creeper. She stood near the edge of the driveway holding 2 paper bags from a diner down the road. Steam drifted from the tops. You stalking me again, I asked. You said that already. Still applies. Her mouth twitched slightly. Not quite a smile. She looked different tonight. No expensive coat. Just jeans boots and a dark green puffer jacket with snow collecting in her hair. Less dealership princess. More real. I hated noticing that. What are you doing here? I asked. You haven't eaten. I blinked once. That your professional diagnosis? You look terrible. Thank you. She held up the bags. I brought burgers. I stared at her suspiciously long enough that she sighed. They're not poisoned, Ethan. Wouldn't be the weirdest thing you've done this week. That actually got a small laugh out of her. Soft, quick! Then gone. I wiped my hands with a rag and took one of the bags. The burger was still hot. We ended up sitting on overturned buckets beside the driveway while snow fell around us. Not exactly romantic, mostly freezing. The garage radio played low classic rock somewhere behind us. For a while, we just ate quietly. Then Madison looked toward the row of cars. How many now? 3 running. Her eyebrows lifted. Seriously. Mister, you really can fix almost anything, huh? I shrugged. My dad taught me young. The second the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Because she noticed, you don't talk about family much. Neither do you. Fair enough. She picked at the edge of her fry container. My father thinks mechanics are replaceable. That obvious. He calls them overhead. I snorted quietly. Sounds like a dealership owner. Madison looked down into her lap. You know what's funny? What? I grew up around garages. She glanced toward the Tahoe. But nobody ever taught me how any of this actually works. The wind picked up hard enough to shake the loose tarp hanging beside the fence. I watched her for a second. You ever want to learn? Her eyes flicked toward me immediately. You'd teach me. I didn't say that. Wow, generous. I took another bite of my burger to hide the fact I was almost smiling. Almost. That's when the front door opened behind us. Lily stepped onto the porch wrapped in a blanket. Dad. I stood immediately. What are you doing awake? I heard voices. Then she spotted Madison sitting beside me. Oh. Madison looked strangely nervous around her again. Lily walked closer carefully through the snow. You came back. Madison nodded once. I brought food? Lily looked at the paper bag in Madison's lap. Dad forgets to eat when he's stressed. Lily. But it's true. Madison laughed quietly under her breath. And damn it, hearing that sound in my driveway did something weird to the atmosphere. Like the tension softened for half a second. Lily sat beside me on the bucket arm and pointed toward the Tahoe. Did you fix that one yet? Almost. You said that yesterday. Transmission bolts fought back. She nodded seriously like that was perfectly reasonable. Madison watched us with an expression I couldn't fully read. Not pity. Something warmer than that. Lily suddenly looked at Madison. Do rich people know how to cook? I choked on my drink. Madison blinked hard. Then somehow she answered completely serious. Honestly, most of us barely know how to use our thermostats. That made Lily laugh. Real laugh. The kind that echoes. For the first time all week, my driveway didn't feel humiliating. It just felt crowded. Human. A moment later, Madison's phone buzzed again. She checked the screen and her entire posture changed instantly. Tension back. What I asked. She locked the phone quickly. Nothing. Didn't look like nothing. It's work. The way she said work sounded exhausting. Not important. Heavy. I watched her too carefully after that. The shadows under her eyes. The way her shoulders stayed tight even sitting still. Then I realized something uncomfortable. Madison Vale looked lonely. Not physically alone. Lonely in the specific way rich people sometimes are when everybody around them wants something. She stood abruptly. I should go. Lily frowned. You always leave fast. Madison looked caught off guard by that. She means I interrupted carefully. It's late. Right. Madison brushed snow off her jeans. Before leaving, she hesitated beside the Tahoe. You know, she said quietly, my service department looked at this SUV for 2 days. And you figured it out in 4 hours. I shrugged. You listening to the engine? Obviously. No, I said. I mean actually listening. Madison stared at me strangely after that. Like I'd said something bigger than I intended. Snow drifted between us in silence. Then finally she nodded once. Good night, Ethan. Night. She started toward her car. Halfway there, she turned back. I never meant for your daughter to get dragged into this. I believed her. That was the dangerous part. Because believing her suddenly made hating her harder. And standing there watching her taillights disappear through the snow, I realized the real problem wasn't the 12 broken cars anymore. It was that Madison Vale was starting to feel less like an enemy every time she came back. The video hit Facebook Friday morning. By lunch, it was everywhere. Somebody had edited together clips of the tow trucks outside my house with dramatic music and captions like, "Single dad claims he can fix anything." Then it cut to footage of me standing in the snow looking pissed while 12 dead cars lined the curb behind me. Millions of views love humiliation when it looks cinematic enough. At the bottom of the screen was a Vale Motors logo. I stared at my phone inside the school pickup line while parents climbed into warm SUVs around me. A few of them recognized me immediately. You can always tell. They look once, then twice. Trying not to make it obvious, one dad near the crosswalk actually whispered something to his wife while glancing toward my truck. I locked my phone and rubbed my jaw hard. Great. Exactly what Lily needed. A second later, the passenger door opened, and she climbed inside carrying construction paper and a plastic snowflake taped together badly. "Hey, Bug." "Hey?" She buckled herself in. Then she looked at me too carefully. "What happened?" "Nothing happened." "You do the forehead thing when something happened." I blinked. "The forehead thing. You get that line right here?" She pointed directly between my eyebrows. I exhaled through my nose. "You're too observant." "I know." As we pulled away from the school, she stared out the window quietly for a minute before asking, "Are people still talking about the cars?" "Kids always know more than adults think." "Some are." "Did I do something wrong telling that lady to say sorry?" "No." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "No, kiddo." Another pause. She looked sad after. That caught me off guard a little. Madison sad wasn't something I'd spent much time considering. "She'll survive," I muttered. But honestly, I wasn't completely sure anymore. That night, the temperature dropped below freezing hard enough to ice the inside edges of my garage windows. I was replacing brake lines on the Subaru when headlights swept across the driveway again. "Madison?" She parked crooked this time, like she'd arrived distracted. The second she stepped out of the Range Rover, I knew something was wrong. No makeup, hair tied back messy, phone still pressed to her ear. No, because if we admit fault publicly, legal's gonna panic. She stopped when she saw me watching. Then she ended the call immediately. "You look tired," I said before I could stop myself. She laughed once. "You look homeless." "Fair." For a second, neither of us moved. The air between us had changed this week. Still tense, still messy, but less sharp around the edges. Madison shoved her phone into her coat pocket. My father saw the video numbers. "Congratulations. He wants to turn it into a campaign." I stared at her. "What?" "He thinks people are emotionally invested now. That's psychotic." "Yeah." Snow crunched softly under her boots as she walked closer. "He wants interviews, updates, maybe sponsor the repairs." I actually laughed from disbelief. "You dumped 12 junk cars in front of my house and now he wants merch." Her mouth twitched despite herself. I said it was a bad idea. "You also started it." That landed. Immediately. She folded her arms tighter. "I know." Silence stretched a second too long. Then Madison looked toward the repaired Ford sitting near the garage. "You really fixed that already?" "Runs fine." "And the Tahoe?" "Almost done." She shook her head slowly like it genuinely bothered her. "Our techs looked at those for weeks. You keep saying like you agree with how that place operates." Madison looked away. Wind pushed strands of dark hair across her face. "You ever spend your whole life trying to prove you belong somewhere?" she asked quietly, then realized the place itself kinda sucks. I leaned back against the Subaru. "Sounds expensive." That got another almost smile. Then it faded fast. "My father thinks if I can't handle pressure, I shouldn't run the dealership someday. So humiliating random mechanics is leadership training now. You think I don't know I screwed up?" The frustration in her voice surprised me. Real frustration. Not polished, not rehearsed. For the first time since this started, Madison Vale sounded her actual age, instead of some corporate spokesperson pretending to be untouchable. She stepped closer. "I thought it'd stay small, okay, couple videos, some dumb engagement numbers. I didn't think. You didn't think there were actual people living here." Her jaw tightened instantly. "That's not fair." "Number. You think I'm some spoiled cartoon villain because I grew up with money. I think you used my life for content." That one hurt her. I saw it immediately. The problem was, it was also true. Madison looked down at the wet pavement for a second before speaking again. "When I was 16, she said quietly, my dad made me fire one of our mechanics 2 days before Christmas." I frowned slightly. "What?" "He'd gotten hurt, couldn't work full shifts anymore." She swallowed once. I cried in the bathroom after because he had kids. The garage light buzzed softly overhead. Madison laughed bitterly to herself. "My father told me if I was going to run dealerships someday, I needed to stop feeling guilty every time somebody lost." I didn't say anything, because suddenly the woman standing in my driveway made a little more sense. Not better, just clearer. A car passed slowly outside. "Probably another person looking for the famous junkyard house." Madison noticed me glance toward the street. "I'm sorry about the attention," she said. I studied her face carefully then, trying to decide whether she meant it. The weird thing, I think she actually did. Before I could answer, the front door opened behind me. Lily stepped outside wearing fuzzy socks and holding a pencil drawing. "Dad, I finished the—" She stopped when she saw Madison. "Oh." Madison straightened awkwardly again. Lily walked over and held up the drawing. It was a picture of the driveway. 12 ugly little cars under snow, and me standing there with a wrench. But off to the side she'd drawn Madison too, Long dark hair, hands in coat pockets, watching. You drew her, I asked carefully. Lily shrugged. She keeps coming back. Madison stared at the picture longer than I expected. Then very softly, "Can I take a photo of that?" Lily nodded immediately. Madison crouched slightly to snap the picture with her phone. And watching her there under the garage light, expensive woman kneeling in melting snow to photograph a child's drawing, I felt something shift again. Small. Dangerous. The kind of feeling you notice too late. By the second week, the driveway looked less like a disaster and more like a functioning repair lot. 3 cars were gone. Sold cheap to people who actually needed them. A nurse from Arvada bought the Ford after her transmission died 2 days before Christmas. A college kid took the Subaru because he needed something that could survive mountain roads without exploding. I didn't make much money off either sale. That wasn't really the point. Meanwhile, the internet had apparently decided I was some kind of blue-collar folk hero, which was deeply embarrassing. A guy at Home Depot asked for a selfie while I was buying coolant. I almost left the cart and walked out. Madison found that hysterical. "You're trending with divorced dads and middle-aged women," she said one night while leaning against my garage workbench. "Living the dream. You have fan pages. I'm deleting your number." She laughed quietly into her coffee. It was weird how normal she looked in my garage now. Like she'd slowly stopped glowing with dealership showroom lighting and started blending into the colder, messier reality of my life. Hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, hands wrapped around cheap gas station coffee. Still expensive looking, just less untouchable. I was under the hood of an old navy blue station wagon parked closest to the fence when Madison nodded toward it. "You've barely touched this one, mister. Transmission. Number? Engine." "Nope." She frowned. "Then why's it still here?" I didn't answer immediately. The garage heater clicked loudly behind us. Outside, snowmelt dripped steadily from the gutters. Finally, I shut the hood gently. "Because I'm not selling it." Madison tilted her head slightly. "Why not?" I stared at the faded paint a second too long before speaking. "It belonged to my ex-wife." The words settled heavily between us. Madison's expression changed immediately. Softer now. Less curious. "Sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be." I grabbed a rag off the workbench, mostly to keep my hands busy. "She left 4 years ago." Madison stayed still. Didn't interrupt. Didn't force sympathy into the silence. I appreciated that more than I wanted to. "She alive?" she asked carefully. "Yeah." That surprised her. "Oh." She just didn't want this life anymore. The truth was uglier than that. Not dramatic. Just sad in the boring, realistic way marriages usually fall apart. Hospital bills after Lily got sick when she was little. Debt. Stress. 2 exhausted people turning into strangers, 1 missed payment at a time. But I didn't explain all that. I rarely did. Madison looked toward the station wagon again. "You keep it because of Lily." "Partly, but not completely." I leaned against the workbench. "You ever hold on to something long after it stops making sense?" Her eyes flicked toward mine immediately. That question hit somewhere personal. I could tell. "Yeah," she said quietly. Too quickly. For a few seconds, we just stood there listening to the soft ticking sounds from the heater. Then Lily burst into the garage wearing mismatched socks and carrying a shoebox. "Dad, look what I found." She dropped the box onto the workbench dramatically. Inside were old Polaroids, most of them bent at the corners. My stomach tightened immediately. Lily pulled one out before I could stop her. "This is Mom's car?" Madison glanced at the photo carefully. Me younger by about 10 years. My ex-wife sitting on the hood of the station wagon outside some diner in Utah. Summer sunlight. Before everything got complicated. "She was pretty," Madison said softly. I looked at the photo too long. Yeah. Lily kept flipping through pictures. Camping trips. Christmas mornings. Grease-covered garage selfies. Fragments from another version of my life. "You still miss her?" Madison asked before she could stop herself. The second the question came out, she looked like she regretted it. Honestly, I should have hated the question. But something about the way she asked sounded genuine. Not fishing, not jealous, just human curiosity. I thought about lying. Instead, I told the truth. "Sometimes I miss who we used to be more than I miss her." Madison went very quiet after that, like she understood the difference. Lily climbed onto the stool beside the workbench. "Dad keeps saying he's not keeping the wagon forever." "Lily, what you do?" Madison looked between us. "You're selling it eventually." "Maybe." But even saying it felt wrong in my chest somehow. That car had become more than a car over the years. It was proof that another life had once existed. One where I wasn't counting grocery money while fixing strangers' engines after midnight. Madison picked up one of the Polaroids carefully. "You looked happy here." I snorted quietly. Everybody looks happy in old pictures. That's not true. I looked up at her. She was staring at the photo like she meant it. And suddenly I realized something strange. I had no idea what Madison looked like genuinely happy. Not polished for social media. Not amused. Not sarcastic. Actually happy. The thought stayed with me longer than it should have. Her phone buzzed against the workbench then. She checked the screen. Instant tension again. Always. I noticed it every time now. You don't have to answer. I kinda do. She stepped away to take the call near the garage entrance. I tried not to listen. Failed immediately. No, I told him we shouldn't push the campaign harder. Pause. Her shoulders tightened. I don't care what the engagement numbers are. Another pause. Then quieter. He has a daughter. Something twisted unexpectedly in my chest hearing her defend us. Madison ended the call hard enough to crack irritation through her calm expression. You okay? I asked before thinking better of it. She laughed tiredly. My father wants branded hoodies now. I stared at her. You're joking. I wish. Lily burst into laughter so hard she almost dropped the Polaroids. Even I smiled at that one. Madison looked at me when it happened. Really looked at me. And the smile slowly disappeared from her face afterward, like she'd noticed something she wasn't prepared for. Not attraction exactly. Something more dangerous. Comfort. The garage suddenly felt smaller than before. Warmer, too. Madison cleared her throat first. I should probably go. Probably. But neither of us moved immediately. Then Lily asked the worst possible question. Are you coming back tomorrow? Madison blinked once. Looked at me. Then back at Lily. Yeah, she said softly. And for some reason hearing that affected me more than it should have. Madison called me at 11:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I almost didn't answer. Nobody calls that late unless something's wrong. I was halfway asleep on the couch with a basketball game muttering low on TV, and Lily passed out upstairs after making me watch some baking competition show with her for 2 hours. My phone buzzed across the coffee table again. Madison Vale. I stared at it a second before answering. You better not be trying to sell me hoodies? For a second, there was only wind on the other end. Then, my car died. I sat up immediately. Where are you? Near Morrison Road. She sounded frustrated, tired too, outside some gas station. You alone? A pause. Yeah. I rubbed a hand over my face and looked toward the dark staircase upstairs. You call roadside. They said 90 minutes, and you called me instead. Another pause. I didn't know who else to call. That hit harder than it should have. 25 minutes later, I pulled into a half-empty gas station lot with my old pickup heater barely working and snow blowing sideways across the windshield. Madison's Range Rover sat near pump 3 with its hazard lights blinking weakly. She was standing outside hugging her coat closed tight against the wind. The second she saw my truck, something in her posture loosened. Not dramatic, just relief. Real relief. I climbed out. What happened? No clue. It started shaking outside Golden and then just died. You keep driving it. Had to get off the road somehow. I popped the hood while she stood beside me, holding a flashlight with freezing fingers. For a minute all I heard was wind and the ticking engine cooling down. Then I found it. Loose ignition coil. Madison blinked. That's it. That's enough. You're kidding. Nope. I tightened the connection temporarily and motioned toward the driver's seat. Try it. The engine turned over rough once, then settled smooth. Madison stared at me through the open window. You fixed that in under 3 minutes. I shrugged. You're welcome. She laughed quietly for the first time that night. God, I was starting to recognize the sound too easily. That felt dangerous. I shut the hood. You should still let me follow you home. You think it'll die again? I think you have terrible luck around cars. That earned an eye roll, but she didn't argue. 10 minutes later, we were crawling through snow-covered roads toward Denver with her SUV following my pickup's taillights through the dark. Halfway there, my phone rang through the truck speakers. Madison. I answered through Bluetooth. You know, her voice crackled softly through the cab. This is deeply humiliating for me. What part? Having the internet's favorite mechanic rescue me at midnight. I smirked despite myself. You survived. Barely. Another stretch of quiet road passed. Then she said, My father fired another tech today. The humor vanished from her voice completely. I glanced at the rearview mirror, though I could barely see her headlights through the snow. What for? He complained about unrealistic repair quotas. Sounds reasonable. Apparently not at Vale Motors. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. You gonna quit? Madison laughed softly. You really think people like me quit family businesses? People like you. People raised to think leaving equals failure. That stayed quiet between us a while. Snow hit the windshield in soft waves, streetlights sliding across wet asphalt. Then Madison spoke again, quieter now. When I was little, my dad used to bring me to the dealership every Saturday. I listened without interrupting. I loved it there. She laughed once under her breath, the smell of tires and coffee and those awful waiting room donuts. I could picture it weirdly clearly. Little Madison wandering shiny showrooms while salesmen spoiled the owner's daughter. I thought everybody there was family, she continued. Then I got older and realized half the employees were terrified of him. Yeah, and somehow I still kept trying to earn his approval anyway. There it was, the real thing underneath everything else. Not arrogance, not cruelty. A woman exhausted from chasing validation from the wrong person her entire life. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just drove. Sometimes that's better. A few exits later, her headlights suddenly disappeared from my mirror. I frowned immediately. Madison. Still here, she said through the speakers. I just pulled over. Why? My steering feels weird. Stay there. I took the next turn, hard enough to splash slush against the curb, and circled back. Her SUV sat on the shoulder under a flickering streetlight. When I reached the driver window, she rolled it down halfway. What happened now? I think the tire's flat. Of course it was. I crouched beside the wheel. Completely shredded, I looked up at her through falling snow. You run over a knife collection tonight. This feels judgmental. Because it is. She surprised me by laughing again. Real this time? Tired but genuine. I changed the tire while she held the flashlight. At some point she stepped closer, because the wind got brutal near midnight. Close enough that her shoulder brushed mine every few seconds. Neither of us moved away. That was the problem. Everything lately felt 1 inch away from becoming something neither of us knew how to handle. After I tightened the last lug nut, I stood up and flexed, feeling back into my frozen hands. You owe me. Madison tilted her head. What do you want? I should have made a joke. Instead, I looked at her too long. Snowflakes catching in her dark hair. Exhaust fog drifting between us. You should apologize to yourself sometime, I said quietly. Her expression changed instantly. What? For acting like you have to become your father to deserve staying at that dealership. The silence after that felt enormous. Madison stared at me like I'd reached into a locked room she didn't let people see. Then very softly. You always talk like this when changing tires. I huffed a laugh through the cold. Only for difficult customers. For a second, I thought she might say something else. Something important. Instead, she looked away first. Thank you for coming tonight, Ethan. The way she said my name this time felt different. Too warm. Too careful. And standing there beside the road at nearly 1 in the morning with snow collecting on both of us, I realized I was in serious trouble. Because somewhere between the 12 broken cars and midnight roadside repairs, Madison Vale had started mattering to me. The next Saturday, Lily dragged me to a school fundraiser I'd been trying to avoid for 2 weeks. You promised, she reminded me for the 5th time while I parked behind the elementary school gym. I said maybe. You said probably, which is basically legally binding. I glanced at her over the steering wheel. Who taught you to argue like that? You. Fair point. The fundraiser was exactly what I expected. Too many folding tables. Too many parents pretending not to be exhausted. And at least 3 crock pots plugged into extension cords that looked like fire hazards. I had just paid $12 for burnt coffee and raffle tickets when somebody called my name. Ethan. I turned. Claire Donnelly. Blonde 30-something friendly smile. Her son had been in Lily's class since 1st grade. We'd talked before at pickup lines and birthday parties. Nothing serious. Still, she looked good enough tonight that I suddenly became aware I was wearing an old thermal shirt with motor oil stains near the cuff. Hey, I said. Claire smiled warmly. Heard you're internet famous now. I groaned immediately. Please don't. Oh, come on. My sister sent me the video. She laughed. You looked very intense. That's one word for it. Lily disappeared toward the bake sale table while Claire stayed beside me, holding 2 paper cups of punch. You surviving all the attention? Barely. Well, she nudged my arm lightly. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing with those cars is kind of amazing. I rubbed the back of my neck awkwardly. Mostly just fixing other people's bad decisions. Still counts. Her hand rested briefly against my forearm while she laughed at something else I said. And unfortunately, that was the exact moment Madison walked into the gym. I noticed her immediately. Not because she was loud. The opposite. She froze near the entrance the second she saw me standing there with Claire. Dark wool coat, hair loose tonight, snow melting along her shoulders. For one strange second, her expression closed off completely. Then the mask came back on. Professional. Calm. Untouchable. My stomach tightened unexpectedly. Claire followed my line of sight. "Oh," she said carefully. "That's the dealership woman, right?" Before I could answer, Madison crossed the gym toward us. Every parent in a 20-foot radius immediately noticed, because of course they did. The viral video had turned us into local gossip material. Madison stopped beside the raffle table. "Didn't realize this was a public appearance," she said lightly. Claire offered a polite smile. "I'm Claire. Madison." The handshake lasted maybe 1 second too short. Tiny thing, still noticeable. Claire glanced between us with growing curiosity. "So, how do you two know each other exactly?" Madison answered before I could. "She's helping me rebuild my driveway." I stared at her. "That's not what happened." "Agree to disagree." Claire laughed awkwardly, like she wasn't sure whether we were flirting or preparing to commit homicide. Honestly. "Fair question." Lily came running back carrying 3 cookies and immediately grabbed Madison's sleeve. "You came." Madison softened instantly around her. "Your father failed to mention this event involved baked goods. He complains about socializing." "I'm aware." I frowned. "You two talk about me now." "All the time," Lily said proudly. "Great. Just fantastic." A few minutes later, we ended up sitting together at one of the folding cafeteria tables while kids screamed during some raffle announcement near the stage. Madison looked deeply uncomfortable in the school gym. Not snobby uncomfortable. More like she genuinely didn't know how to exist in spaces that casual. Parents in hoodies, paper snowflakes taped badly to walls, cheap pizza smell everywhere. Claire eventually got pulled away by another parent, but not before giving me a look that clearly said, "You and the rich girl are absolutely a thing," which was ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. Madison watched Claire leave. "She seems nice." "She is." A pause. "She flirting with you?" I nearly choked on my coffee. "What?" Madison shrugged too casually. "I'm asking. You sound invested." "I'm observant." Dangerously close to jealousy there. That hit harder than I expected. Madison looked down immediately, lips pressing together. Then she laughed once. Small. Forced. "You wish." The thing was, I wasn't completely sure I did. A teacher interrupted us, asking if we wanted to bid on silent auction items. The second she left, Madison leaned closer slightly. "My father wants me to offer you a job." I blinked. "At the dealership." "Head of diagnostics." I stared at her. "That's serious." "He saw the engagement numbers after you fixed the Tahoe." She sounded exhausted already. "Customers trust you now." That might be the most depressing sentence I've heard all week. Madison smiled faintly. "You'd make more money." Money. There it was. The dangerous temptation. Because she wasn't wrong. My bank account was hanging on by threads half the time. The house needed repairs. Lily deserved better than constant budgeting and discount grocery stores. Still, I shook my head slowly. Number. Madison frowned. "You didn't even think about it." "I did. And I already know what dealerships like yours do to mechanics." Her face cooled immediately. "Dealerships like mine. You know what I mean?" "No," she said quietly. "I actually don't." The noise of the gym suddenly felt farther away. I lowered my voice. "You got techs rushing inspections because management cares more about turnover than safety." "That's not me." "Maybe not, but it's your family's name on the building." Madison leaned back in her chair slowly after that. Hurt, trying not to show it. I immediately regretted how harsh it sounded, but not enough to take it back. She folded her arms. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "You're the only person who talks to me like I'm not important." I snorted softly. "Trust me, you're still very annoying." That finally pulled a real laugh out of her. Quick enough that it almost disappeared before I caught it. Then the raffle winner got announced over the speakers, and Lily screamed because she'd won a giant stuffed moose. Chaos exploded across the gym. Parents clapping. Kids yelling. And in the middle of all that noise, Madison leaned closer toward me, just enough for me to smell her perfume under the cafeteria coffee and winter air. Quietly, so only I could hear. "I didn't want Claire touching your arm." I went completely still. Madison seemed to realize what she'd admitted exactly 1 second too late. Her eyes widened slightly. Then she stood up too fast. "I should go, Madison. Tell Lily congratulations." She grabbed her coat immediately and disappeared through the gym doors before I could stop her, leaving me sitting there with cold coffee, a pounding heartbeat, and the terrifying realization that this thing between us had officially stopped being simple. Madison avoided me for 4 days, which shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did. But after weeks of her showing up in my driveway almost every night, the silence felt loud. Too loud? I caught myself looking for her headlights around 8 o'clock, checking my phone more than I wanted to admit. Even Lily noticed. Did you scare her away? She asked Tuesday night while doing homework at the kitchen table. I tightened a bolt under the hood of the station wagon. Number. She hasn't come back. People get busy. Lily gave me a look over the top of her math worksheet that was way too knowing for an 8-year-old. You're bad at lying. I ignored that, mostly because she was right. The truth was the fundraiser changed something. Not dramatically. Just enough that we both noticed it. Madison admitting she was jealous should have felt ridiculous. Instead, it replayed in my head at inconvenient times while I tried to work, which was exactly why I was irritated when Vale Motors finally dragged me back into their mess Friday afternoon. A man named Carlos Ramirez showed up at my driveway driving one of the SUVs I'd repaired earlier that week. He looked pale, shaken. There's something wrong with the brakes, he said immediately after stepping out. My stomach dropped. I tested the vehicle myself right there on the street. The brakes were soft, dangerously soft. But I knew for a fact I'd replaced the worn lines personally before selling it. I got underneath the SUV again with a flashlight. That's when I saw it. Cheap aftermarket components, not the parts I installed. My jaw tightened immediately. Where'd you get this serviced after buying it? Carlos frowned. Vale Motors called me back in for a complimentary inspection. Of course they did. Ice slid slowly down my spine. Did they replace anything? They said there was an issue with the brake assembly. I stood up too fast and hit my head against the frame hard enough to curse, because suddenly pieces started connecting in ways I didn't like. Vale Motors wasn't just sloppy. They were cutting corners. Dangerous ones. An hour later, I walked into the dealership for the first time in years. The showroom smelled exactly the same. Coffee. Rubber cleaner. Cheap cologne from salesmen pretending they made more money than they actually did. Nobody stopped me, because apparently everyone recognized me now. Fantastic. I found Madison in an upstairs office staring at paperwork with both hands pressed against her temples. She looked up immediately when I walked in. Relief flashed across her face first, then concern. What happened? I dropped the brake invoice onto her desk. You tell me. Madison frowned and picked it up. As she scanned the paperwork, the color slowly drained from her face. No, those aren't the parts I installed. That can't be right. You got customers driving around with garbage brake components. Madison stood abruptly. No, we use approved vendors. Then somebody's lying to you. She grabbed another folder from the desk and flipped through papers faster now. I watched the panic build in real time. Tiny things. Her breathing changing. Fingers shaking slightly. Then she froze completely. What I asked. Very slowly, Madison turned one page toward me. Her signature sat at the bottom. Approval authorization. My stomach tightened. You signed off on this. I didn't. Her voice cracked. Then she swallowed hard and tried again. I don't remember approving these. But that's your name. I know that's my name. The office suddenly felt suffocatingly quiet. Downstairs, I could hear muffled sales chatter through the showroom speakers. Christmas music playing somewhere near reception. Completely normal. Meanwhile, up here, everything had tilted sideways. Madison looked through more files frantically. Then another signature appeared. And another, all hers. Except now I could see what she saw too. The dates. Late-night approvals. Digital signatures processed in batches, not personally reviewed. Her father or accounting department could have pushed them through under her credentials. You gave people access to your authorization. I was handling financing, inventory, staffing. She stopped, horrified at herself. I trusted my father. There it was. The real wound underneath all this. Not just fraud. Betrayal. I leaned against the desk slowly. How long's this been happening? I don't know. Madison looked physically sick now. She sat back down hard in the office chair. Oh my God. I should have stayed angry. Honestly, I tried. But watching her realize the family business she spent her whole life defending might have used her as legal cover. That wasn't satisfying. It was awful. She rubbed both hands over her face. If this gets out, someone could get killed if it doesn't. The second I said it, pain crossed her expression, because she knew I was right. A long silence settled between us. Then very quietly she asked, You think I knew? It wasn't really a question. More fear. I looked at her carefully. At the untouched coffee beside her desk. The exhaustion under her eyes. The way she looked less like a dealership executive right now and more like somebody realizing the ground beneath them wasn't solid. No, I admitted. Madison's shoulders lowered slightly in relief, but only slightly, because innocence didn't erase consequences. She stared down at the paperwork again. My father's going to blame the service department. Probably. He'll fire half the techs to protect himself. Probably. Tears welled suddenly in her eyes. She blinked hard immediately like she was angry they existed. I was trying so hard to prove I could run this place. The vulnerability in her voice hit harder than crying would have. I stepped closer before I thought better of it. Madison. No, listen. She stood again too quickly. You were right about me. That's not what I said. I humiliated you because I thought if I acted tough enough, maybe people there would finally take me seriously. Her laugh sounded broken now. And meanwhile, they were using my name to cover unsafe repairs. I hated hearing her talk about herself like that, which was a serious problem, because somewhere along the way, protecting Madison Vale had become instinct. She looked up at me finally, eyes red now. You should hate me. I held her stare longer than I meant to. The office suddenly felt very small, very warm. I tried, I said quietly. That silence afterward felt dangerous, like one wrong movement could change everything between us. Then footsteps echoed outside the office door downstairs, reality crashing back in. Madison stepped away first, putting distance between us, professional mask trying desperately to return. But now I'd seen too much underneath it, and judging by the way her hands still shook slightly against the desk, she knew it too. The story broke on a Monday morning. By noon, every local news station in Denver had some version of the same headline running across the bottom of the screen. Vale Motors under investigation after safety complaints. I watched it happen from the repair bay of my driveway while snow melted slowly off the station wagon beside me. Lily was at school. The neighborhood was quiet, and my phone would not stop vibrating. Calls, texts, messages from mechanics I hadn't talked to in years. Some angry, some unsurprised. One just read, "About damn time." I ignored all of them, because the only message I cared about came from Madison. "Can you come here?" No emoji, no explanation. Just that. I got to Vale Motors 20 minutes later. The place looked nothing like it had during the viral videos. No balloons, no sales music, no polished fake energy. Customers crowded near reception arguing with managers while employees stood around looking terrified of losing their jobs. A local news van sat outside near the entrance. The second I walked in, heads turned. "Fantastic," one salesman actually muttered. "There he is." Like I was either the hero or the executioner. Honestly, I wasn't sure which. I found Madison upstairs in the conference room, and for the first time since I met her, she looked completely exhausted. Not stylish exhausted, destroyed exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back badly. Half-drunk coffee sitting cold beside stacks of paperwork. She looked up when I entered. "You came?" "Yeah." For a second, neither of us moved. Then she handed me a folder. Inside were customer complaints. Brake failures, inspection discrepancies, parts invoices that didn't match repair reports. Enough to bury the dealership if regulators dug deep enough. My father's denying everything she said quietly. Of course he is. He told the board I approved the cost-cutting measures. I looked up sharply. "What?" Madison laughed once. The sound was hollow. "He's protecting the company." "No, he's protecting himself." Silence. Then she nodded slightly. Because she knew it too. I closed the folder carefully. What happens now? My attorney says if I publicly take responsibility, regulators might go easier on the dealership. My jaw tightened immediately. And your father's okay with that. He encouraged it. That did it. I stood up so fast the chair legs scraped hard against the floor. "You're not taking the fall for this." Madison looked tired more than defensive. "I signed the approvals, Ethan. You trusted the wrong people. That's not the same thing. It is legally." God. I dragged a hand across my face and paced once toward the conference room windows overlooking the showroom floor. Employees below moved around like people trapped inside a sinking ship, pretending everything was still normal. Then Madison spoke again. "There's more." I turned back. "The bank's pulling financing." "Shit, mister. If that happens, payroll collapses." "Exactly." She stared down at the table. These people didn't all deserve this. And that right there was why I couldn't walk away anymore. Because despite everything, Madison still cared about the employees before herself. Most executives wouldn't. Mine certainly hadn't years ago. I leaned against the window slowly. "How much?" Her eyes lifted carefully. "What? How much does the bank need covered?" Madison frowned like she genuinely didn't understand why I was asking. "Ethan, how much?" She hesitated, then finally said the number. I let out a low whistle. Big. Very big. But not impossible. Not with the licensing money. Not with the investor calls I'd been quietly taking for weeks after the videos blew up. Madison studied my face slowly. "You're thinking about something." "Maybe." "Number." I almost smiled despite everything. You don't even know what I'm going to say. I know that look. The room fell quiet again. Then her phone buzzed violently against the conference table. She checked the screen. Her expression closed instantly. My father wants me downstairs. Why? Press conference. Of course. I followed her down anyway. The showroom was packed now. Customers, employees, cameras. The smell of stale coffee and tension hung thick in the air. Richard Vale stood near the reception desk in a perfect navy suit, looking calm enough to make me want to punch something. When he saw me beside Madison, his expression darkened immediately. Mr. Brooks. Richard. Madison's father turned toward reporters before speaking quietly out the side of his mouth. You shouldn't be here. She asked me to come. His jaw flexed once. Then the cameras started rolling. A reporter stepped forward first. Mr. Vale, is it true unsafe parts were approved under your daughter's authorization? And there it was. The setup. I looked at Madison. She knew it too. I could actually see the moment she realized her father intended to sacrifice her publicly. Richard placed one hand against Madison's shoulder. Pure performance. My daughter has been deeply involved in day-to-day operations, he said carefully. Madison went pale beside him. The reporters immediately started firing questions. Did Ms. Vale authorize the repairs? Was management aware of customer safety risks? Will criminal charges be pursued? Richard kept talking, never once directly lying, just guiding the blame exactly where he wanted it, toward her. Madison stood frozen beside him, and something inside me snapped. I stepped forward before I could think better of it. Those approvals were processed through shared management credentials. The entire showroom turned silent. Richard's head whipped toward me instantly. I kept going. I reviewed the records myself. Madison stared at me in shock. The reporters pivoted immediately. Are you alleging fraudulent authorization? I'm alleging technicians were pressured to reduce repair costs under executive management. Richard's face hardened. You have no standing here. No, I said evenly. But I do have documentation. That changed everything. Reporters exploded with questions again, employees whispering now. Managers panicking. And beside me, Madison looked like she couldn't breathe. Richard stepped closer toward me. Low voice. Controlled anger. You think you can destroy this business? I met his stare evenly. Number? Then I glanced around the damaged showroom. At this point, I think you already handled that yourself. The silence afterward felt nuclear. Madison looked between us slowly, then finally spoke for the first time, voice shaking slightly but steady enough. I'm cooperating fully with the investigation. Her father turned toward her sharply. Madison. Number? She stepped away from his hand. Small movement. Huge meaning. And for the first time since I'd met her, she looked less like Richard Vale's daughter, and more like herself. Reporters surged forward immediately. Questions flying. Cameras everywhere. Chaos. I should have left then. Instead, I stayed beside her while the entire place started collapsing around us, because some part of me knew she was about to lose almost everything she'd spent her whole life trying to protect. And nobody should have to stand through that alone. 3 weeks later, I stood inside the Vale Motors showroom, holding a pen worth more than my first toolbox. Snow drifted slowly outside the glass windows along Colfax Avenue, while lawyers shuffled paperwork around the conference table behind me. Everything smelled different now. Quieter. No fake citrus cleaner trying to impress customers. No sales music blasting through speakers. Just coffee, paper, and the strange silence that settles into places after something finally stops pretending to be healthy. The bank had accepted the restructuring plan 2 days earlier. Richard Vale was out. Several executives resigned before regulators could force them to. Most of the techs kept their jobs. That part mattered to me more than owning anything. A lawyer slid the final document toward me. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brooks. Still sounded weird. I signed anyway, just like that the place belonged to me, or enough of it that everyone here understood things had changed permanently. Across the showroom, Madison stood beside the coffee station wearing a charcoal coat with both hands wrapped around a paper cup she clearly wasn't drinking from. She looked nervous. That was new. After the lawyers started gathering their things, the room slowly emptied, until it was just us standing there under fluorescent lights, humming softly overhead. Neither of us spoke immediately. Then Madison looked around the showroom. You kept the name. People know the name. You could have changed it. I shrugged slightly. Cars still break either way. That earned the smallest smile. The tired kind. Not performative anymore. Real. I walked toward the windows overlooking the service bays downstairs. Most of the lifts were occupied already. Work mattered more than scandal in places like this. People still needed brakes fixed, tires rotated, engines diagnosed. Life moved on fast in repair shops. Madison stepped beside me quietly. You know, everybody thinks this is revenge, right? I glanced at her. What part? You buying the dealership? I looked back toward the service bays. Would revenge keep payroll intact? Number. Then I guess they're wrong. The silence after that felt softer than it used to between us. Not tense anymore. Careful. Like both of us understood how much damage existed underneath everything we hadn't said out loud. Madison stared through the glass for a long moment before speaking again. I owe you an apology. You already apologized. Not really. I turned toward her then. She looked terrified suddenly. Not of me. Of honesty. That hit harder. Madison set her coffee down carefully on the windowsill. When I dumped those cars at your house, she swallowed once. I thought if I acted ruthless enough, people at the dealership would finally respect me. I stayed quiet, because she needed to finish. And instead, I humiliated a man trying to take care of his daughter. Her voice lowered. I made your life harder because I wanted strangers online to think I was powerful. Outside, snow brushed softly against the showroom windows. Madison laughed once under her breath. I keep replaying Lily telling me I made you sad. God, that kid really did permanent emotional damage without trying. Madison finally looked up at me. You should have hated me. I did for a while. For a while. I exhaled slowly through my nose. That became difficult. Something shifted across her face hearing that. Small. Dangerous. The same feeling that had been following us for weeks now. Neither of us moved. The dealership around us buzzed faintly with distant impact wrenches and muffled voices from the service department below. Real life continuing underneath whatever this was between us. Madison looked down briefly. I almost left Denver. That surprised me. When? After the investigation started? Why didn't you? Her eyes lifted carefully back toward mine. Lily asked if I was coming back tomorrow. Jesus. I looked away first this time, because somehow that affected me more than everything else. Madison stepped a little closer. Not dramatic. Barely noticeable. Still enough that I could smell her perfume mixed with coffee and winter air again. I don't know what this is, she admitted quietly. Neither do I. That seems unhealthy. Probably. That finally made both of us laugh softly. The tension loosened just enough to breathe again. Downstairs, somebody started an engine and revved it too hard. A mechanic immediately yelled something angry across the bay. Normal shop chaos. Madison smiled faintly listening to it. You really belong here. I studied her for a second. You know what's weird? What? You do too. That wiped the smile right off her face. Not because she disliked hearing it. Because she did. Too much. For a long moment, neither of us spoke again. Then Madison asked very quietly, Are you ever going to stop surprising me? Doubt it. She nodded once like she expected that answer. Then she glanced toward the showroom doors. I should probably leave before your employees start gossiping. They already gossip. Fair. But she didn't move yet. Neither did I. The truth was, after everything that happened, some huge, dramatic confession would have felt fake. Life doesn't usually work like movies. People don't heal instantly because tension finally breaks. Trust takes longer than attraction. Maybe longer than forgiveness too. So instead I said the most ordinary thing possible. You eaten yet? Madison blinked once. What? There's a diner about 10 minutes from here. I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets casually to hide the fact my heartbeat had suddenly gotten stupid. Food's terrible. Coffee's worse. A slow smile appeared on her face then, warm enough to make my chest tighten. Sounds incredibly romantic. Don't ruin this for me. She laughed softly, and there it was again. That sound that somehow stopped feeling dangerous and started feeling a little like home. As we walked toward the doors together, snow falling steadily outside the showroom windows, I realized something strange. 12 broken cars had shown up in my driveway because a woman thought humiliation would make people respect her. But somewhere between the arguments, midnight repairs, coffee runs, and all the quiet moments neither of us planned for, we'd accidentally rebuilt each other too. Not perfectly, just honestly. And honestly was probably better. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, I really want to know something. At what point did you stop seeing Madison as the villain? Was it the night she brought burgers in the snow? The roadside breakdown? The school fundraiser? Or maybe when she finally stood up to her father even knowing it could cost her everything? Stories like this matter to me because real people are messy. Most of us have hurt someone while trying to survive something ourselves. And sometimes the hardest thing isn't falling in love. It's admitting we were wrong before we ever deserved it. So tell me where you're listening from tonight and let me know what part hit you the hardest. And if you enjoy emotional slow burn stories like this one, the quiet kind with awkward silences, damaged people and feelings nobody knows how to say out loud, yet stick around and subscribe. There are more coming. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are also the people carrying wounds we never got to see. That doesn't excuse the damage they cause. It doesn't erase embarrassment, betrayal, or pain. But life gets a lot more honest when we realize human beings are rarely just good or bad. Most of us are just trying to survive the pressure we were raised inside of. Some people become softer because of it. Others become colder before they finally learn how to change. I think one of the hardest lessons in adulthood is understanding that love isn't built through perfect moments. It's built through uncomfortable conversations, small acts of kindness, showing up after mistakes, and choosing honesty when it would be easier to protect your pride. Real connection happens when someone sees the worst version of you and stays long enough to understand how you became that person. And maybe that's why stories like this stay with us. Because deep down, we all want to believe people can grow, that broken things can still become meaningful again, that even after humiliation, failure, heartbreak, or regret, life can still surprise us with tenderness. So now I want to hear from you. What moment in this story hit you emotionally the hardest, and what life lesson did you take away from it? Leave a comment below. I read more of them than you probably think. And if you enjoy emotional slow burn storytelling like this, don't forget to subscribe and stay for the next story.